Boston College's pass rush was a disaster in 2025. So Bill O'Brien went into the transfer portal and may have completely changed the identity of this defense overnight.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade, and let's dive into a great episode where we're going to look at a specific position that Boston College just has to change, the edge rusher. How good can it be this year? We're going to look at the depth. Two names that are in now that I think are going to be real assets for BC, and we're going to look at what this season could look like for a position that just needs to improve. So let's dive in. Last year, as I said earlier, what the pass rush was a disaster for Boston College. Just a year after losing Donovan Azaraku, you were stuck trying to find players that would hopefully, put together some sort of pass rush. And in actuality, you really didn't get any of that. The most you got in terms of sacks was Quintavious, who had 2 sacks. That was who you were hoping for to be a big sack leader. He just could not get it going. And then you had a hodgepodge of other guys at other edge rusher position, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it. And those didn't work. You got, smatterings of favor Bate, maybe a little bit of Ela Boykin at times, but it was never consistent. What the big issue was that quarterbacks could just sit back there and just pick this team apart. And the only way BC would get pressure on them is to overload blitz, and that never worked. And that it would work sometimes, but it also would put a young secondary in a very not good position. Let's just leave it at that. Well, this offseason, you lost Quintavious Hutchins. He got drafted, and we're not going to talk about what just happened to Quintavious Hutchins because that's just sad. Wasted opportunity right there. But we will look at what Bill O'Brien did to address a need on his roster, which was to go out and grab 2 portal players that could really add to your team. The first has to be Chris Jones. Chris Jones out of Georgia was a guy that played on a defense, obviously Kirby Smart's defense, that is loaded with talent. And he is, a younger player. He hasn't been around all that much. And he, when you're stuck on a Georgia team filled with NFL players, you're not going to get out there. So he's a redshirt sophomore. He's been around for 3 years. He's been, he's got the college build. I got to tell you, from my experience, from Mike Sidley's experience watching at camp, they got something here. Chris Jones is everywhere. This is the kind of dynamic playmaking edge rusher that Boston College did not have last year. Now, I would say that if he's the only playmaker you have, it would be tough, but you watch him out there and he's beating, offensive linemen. He's beating his guy over and over and over again. Some of the scrimmages I watched, there were plays where he was back there and it was just like, there he is again. There he is again. Who was that? Chris Jones. It's Chris Jones again. Like, it was very apparent. And so I think, what you have here is a player that was a 4-star coming out of high school, went to Georgia, didn't really get a chance there because many of those guys don't, and now is going to get his first opportunity to be a starter at a Power 4 program. And I think he's going to eat it up. I think this is going to be one of the stories of the year for Boston College is going to be the emergence of Chris Jones. I truly believe. So with Jones, you have a blue blood pedigree that is actually showcasing themselves on the field. Like, this is a guy that I really do believe could be All-ACC at some point. Will he be All-ACC next year? But if his trajectory is what I think it could be, this could be a guy that is a really special Boston College defender. It just looks like that could be the way he's heading. I think that's something we could look forward to. And it's not, I think it's important to say too that, yeah, you can sometimes get a really good edge defender. Like, you got Donovan Azaraku 2 years ago. But you also need somebody else out there, because if you just have Donovan Azaraku and a paperweight, they're going to just put all the pressure on, all the extra emphasis on him, and it's going to make his job just that much harder. And I'm not sure if Jones is there to take on like an insane amount of like pressure, but I don't think BC's going to have to worry about that, because I think they have another edge defender, and this is someone from last year that completely has surprised me. And I talked about him when we were talking about surprising players. That's Onye Nwosisi. Onye Nwosisi came last year from Valpo. And this was a guy that you knew that you lost Azaraku. You knew that you're going to need some depth there. So you went down to the FCS level to go to Valpo. And you're thinking, okay, maybe this guy, good size, 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", he could be a serviceable player. He plays 3 games last year and then is gone with an injury, and you don't see him again. Biggest blessing in disguise. I want to say this again. This spring, I watched him play, and I said to myself, who is that? Because last year, Onye Nwosisi at camp, even during the summer camp when I was watching him, he never was a player that really caught my attention. You'd see him out there here or there, but he kind of just blended in, and he wasn't really a guy that wowed you with anything. This camp, just like with Jones, it's like, holy moly, where did he come from? This is like a revelation. This could be, the second best transfer portal edition of this class could be someone from last year that just didn't get to play. Like, watching him and Chris Jones back there, you're saying to yourself, wow, they've got a pair of edge rushers this year. And if one of these guys takes off, the other one's going to be okay enough that you're going to get some consistent pass rush. And if you get that consistent pass rush, your defense will take a big step forward. Remember that cycle that they got into last year where you couldn't get pressure, so you had to bring in blitzers, which put pressure on your younger defensive backs, and they struggled. And there was just a cyclical cycle that Tim Lewis got stuck in, where he would have to bring extra guys. And then, an Ashton Cunningham would get burned, or even a Max Tucker, because you just didn't have enough weapons out there. Ted Roof in his first year is going to have options. He's going to have some toys to play with in terms of getting his defense aggressive, because Ted Roof loves to be aggressive. He loves to do things with his defense where he's got guys going in coverage that are looking like they're going to go in with the blitz, and you have other guys that are doing all different things. As long as your team is smart enough and coached well enough, they can do this. It can make for a very dynamic defense, but you have to have the right guys out there. I look at Chris Jones, I look at Onye Nwosisi, and I look at 2 guys that I think are going to be able to fit into very well with this, and are going to give BC a pass rush that they desperately need, and will help them stay in games. Obviously you've got a few on your schedule that you're going to be like, will they be able to do anything against these offensive lines? I specifically Notre Dame and Miami, but all these other games, your Cincinnati's, your Rutgers, your Syracuse's, Duke, even Florida State, who struggles at times, they could really be impactful. They could be the thing that many folks aren't talking about when they're looking at this upcoming season. All the talk right now is all these, you got transfers everywhere, all these changes. Well, the defensive edge rusher position last year was not good. They went out, they added players, and we'll talk about the second one they added in the second segment, but they also really refined and brought out the best in the one they brought out last year. Now, in our second segment, I really like the depth now too. There's a bunch of players that could be stepping up, and I'll look at all of them in just a moment. The NBA playoffs are here, and every possession matters. If you're looking to get closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. Were you watching Game 7 of the Cavs and the Pistons? Maybe you were thinking Cleveland's got this. You added that with a little bit of some player props, made it a parlay. You can do all that on FanDuel. Best part about it, it's super easy to use. I open that app, it's all right there. You put the sport you want, you see the different games, you find the parlays, and I love the extra bonuses they have. Sometimes they'll have like, a way to juice up the odds, and they're all across the top. You click and add it, you can just put the little slider on. It's easy to do. You win, you get your money back, you get your money quickly as well. So go to fanduel.com to get yourself started with FanDuel. Play your game. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here. And if you are part of my group, and I got a lot of you guys out there, I know it, that listen to me 5 days a week, that listen to me all the time. Maybe you listen to me multiple times a week. You're my everydayers. You are part of a crew that want to get your Boston College news from an insider that just, has covered BC for ages and just knows the school inside and out. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I want to invite you to our Everydayer Club. Our Everydayer Club has 2 different tiers. Our basic access, you're going to get a ad-free show. You're going to get access to our group Discord chat, which is a group chat. Like if you ever have group chats with your friends, it's just like that, but it's all BC stuff. So you could join there. And if you do the all access tier, you get bonus episodes, you get text from me, you get email, newsletters. Excuse me, the word was not coming to my brain. So mowing the lawn all day. Sorry about that. And a few other extra great perks. All you got to do is go to lockedonbostoncollege.supercast.com right now. Again, that's lockedonbostoncollege.supercast.com. And I hope you join our Everydayer Club today. So, as I said to start this all off, BC last year just really struggled to get any pressure on the quarterback. It was a big issue for them. They had 17 and a half sacks as a unit. You're looking at the edge rushers, and they had just a few. Now, you got a couple returning players that I think are worth mentioning. The first being Eli Boykin. Eli Boykin was a spring transfer who came over from Barton College. And coming from a Division II school, he was very, there were a lot of teams that were in on him. But it took a while for him to get ready. And that makes sense, right? Like you're coming from D2 to the FBS level and Power 4, and you're going to need to it's going to take you some time. And it did. He ended the season with a sack, and you saw him playing more and more as the season kind of went along, but he wasn't like an impact player. But he's going to be someone I think you're going to see this year, and it's someone that's going to get snaps and be someone that will play. I imagine some good role. The other name that I would think that you might see a little bit too was Favor Bate. Favor Bate started to see a bigger and bigger role as the injury started to pile up. And he had his ups and downs. His downs were tough. He had some really tough moments, but coming from Merrimack as a younger player, it was kind of expected. I think his role would be perfect as a depth guy. Like you don't need to get him out there. He's a fun guy to watch, an amazing guy to interview, like one of my favorites to listen to. But do you need him out there 40 to 50 snaps a game? I don't think that's the best role for him. Maybe situational stuff, find what he does really well and get him out there. So he's another, both of those guys I think will be situational players. The 2 names I think that could really jump and become really good players, and maybe we'll see them sooner rather than later, is Israel Oladipupo and Demetrius Ballard. Now, Demetrius Ballard is a 6'6" transfer from Buffalo. And, I think he's a redshirt sophomore. And when you go and you see him live, the first thing that strikes you is he is every bit of 6'6". He is huge. And the 6'6" is not exaggerating. He is really that big. And he's explosive out there. He's big, he's physical. And I think he is a perfect addition to your depth. Like a guy that could immediately and not like depth like Favor Bate depth, like a guy that could situationally play. I'm thinking like if one of your guys got dinged up, right? If Chris Jones has to miss some time, Demetrius Ballard would be one of the first guys that would be called. I think I could see him playing. you hear scouts 247. He was one of the most underrated players, but one of the biggest steals of the transfer portal. Like a really good evaluation by the staff to get him. And I think just again, you're building this unit with players I think that are going to be much improved over what you had. So he is one. The other name that I really like is Israel Oladipupo. And you saw a bit of him last year. He played situationally here and there. I think he only played in a couple of games, but he played in 4 and he had 2 tackles. But again, pulling back the curtain, I've seen him a lot at practices last summer, especially. He was a freshman that popped for me. It was a guy I watched and said, wow. And from sources I've talked to, I've heard the same thing. Like, this is a guy that's going to really could potentially grow to be a very solid player. So he's a redshirt freshman, excuse me, out of Indiana, and a guy that, really smart kid. I think that's just going to really flourish on this roster. So he could be someone too that really takes that next step. And if he takes that next step, would be surprised to see him on the depth chart right away. Wouldn't be surprising. The third name I think that's worth bringing up as well that could be a name to watch for is Bryce Lewis. Bryce Lewis, folks were asking me, and I talked about him a little bit on the underrated or under the radar players. People were asking me about whether he could be a tight end, because I've said before that I've heard the tight end position's fine. We don't know what's going on with Kalen Chudzinski, but why don't they think about putting Bryce Lewis at tight end? Maybe they may think of that. Who knows? But I do know that he's really starting to grow as an edge rusher. Like he's becoming a name that he's still kind of raw. He's still learning. But again, he's just like Ballard. He's 6'6". He's huge. Like these guys don't grow on trees, and he's picking it up. It's not like he's got 2 left feet. Like Bryce Lewis is starting to pick it up. He did. Obviously, his dad, Tim Lewis, is gone, but he stuck around. So he clearly likes something going on at BC, whether it's the school, the coaching staff. I'm not sure what it is, but he's happy here. I see him getting in there as well. So that's our edge rushers that you're looking at, right? And when I'm mentioning this, like I go back to last year, and you had Q, and I don't think I would have to go back and re-listen to what I said about that. I just could not see Q being a strong pass rusher. Felt like he was an average one or a decent one. And I mean, he had his moments last year. He was not an average pass rusher, though. He ended the season with 2 sacks. And then you just look at the rest of that roster from last year. And I think I remember thinking to myself, like, once I saw Onye Nwosisi not really doing much, I was like, they don't really have much. They were throwing other guys out there. You saw Favorite Bate kind of do some stuff, but like it wasn't to the level of what we're seeing this spring from a Chris Jones and from a Onye Nwosisi part 2 or version 2. It's a very different feel. So I like the depth. I think that that's a piece, because now you're looking and you're saying, well, if a guy gets hurt, you have a Demetrius Ballard, you have a Bryce Lewis, you have an Israel Oladipupo, and that puts you in a much more favorable spot. And I think it's a credit to the staff that they really have structured this room in a much more it's a much stronger room than we have seen in years past. So my next question is, with this defensive change, will the defense get better, and how good could the pass rush and the defense in general get? I have some thoughts about that in just a moment. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and thank you all for listening. And if you're looking for a second listen, let me tell you, I'm trying to point to which way it's going. There we go. To Locked On ACC with Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, as I continually mention, the issue with the pass rush was one of many problems last year, to go along with injuries, tackling, scheme. Just there was no talent, like lack of talent in key positions. It was just a lot of issues. But my question to myself is, first of all, when you get a guy and you're feeling it, like, wow, they've got something here. How good could this pass rush get? Could it be really good? And I've talked to some folks that really feel strongly that this unit is going to be not only much better, but really good. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. I'm again a more of a prove it to me point. Like, I don't want to just be told that. I want to see it. So I'm wondering, I mean, just watching Chris Jones is a lot of fun. I assume it's not because he's doing so well because the offensive line is struggling. I don't think that's the case. I think it's because he's good. But my question then is, how good can this group get? I think you could get 4 to 6 sacks out of both guys. And as a base, like, that's the low floor ceiling for these two, for Jones and for Nwosisi. Could I see either of them getting 10 sacks? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I feel pretty good that there could be a guy that gets 9, 10 sacks and becomes a very good pass rusher. But regardless, they had 17 and a half sacks last year. And you look at who got most of them, and it was a lot of, you had Micah Mehdi, Kamori Dixon, Tyus Clemens, and Sedarius McConnell led the team, and, Owen McGowan, Carter Davis, like, not the guys you're expecting, right? Now, I think 17 and a half is way too low. I'm thinking 26, 27 sacks, which, or maybe even more. I can't get the numbers right now because the site I use is dead. I don't know what happened to it. It just like crashed tonight. The year before, BC was elite with pass rushing because you had Nazaraku, who led country in sacks for most of the year. I don't expect them to do that. No, that's not what I'm saying here. I am saying, though, could they be in the upper quarter of the ACC? Maybe. Could they be in the upper half? I would be feeling pretty confident that they will. I'll say that. I think they will be confident that they could be in the upper half of the ACC in sacks next year. So then I look at that. They're in the upper half of the ACC in sacks. How good could this defense be? You lost Omar Thornton. That was your big loss in the portal. You lost Q, which, you can't just discount that, but you lost Q. So Darius McConnell and Owen McGowan and Davion Crouch, but Davion Crouch didn't even play. I wonder to myself, the BC defense that was like 120th to 130th, the most, metrics, can they get much better? And I think they could. The part that worries me is that, I think that the staffing and the roster itself will be much improved, but you're playing a much tougher schedule against some really good offenses. You got Miami, you got Notre Dame, Georgia Tech is always tough. I know you played them last year. Even Florida State, if they get things going, they could be tough and score a lot of points. That being said, I think this defense could have some good games, and that could really improve where they're at. I look at teams like Duke, Syracuse, Rutgers, Cincinnati, Maine. Even I say Florida State before, but there's a good chance that we get to November and they could be a gigantic mess. I think there's a chance for them to get themselves solidified and be a solid defense. Again, not great, but still on the right path. And that's what I think a lot of the season is going to have to be. I know folks don't want to hear it, especially with the portal, but barring that Mason McKenzie is the next Johnny Manziel, that this offensive just clicks, you're going to be looking at a just incremental improvement. And I've said before, like, the incremental improvement should be a bowl game. That should be what the goal is. And I know for some folks that's like, ugh, but you can't go from 2 to 10, lose half your roster, and then go, 8-4 is my goal. And if it doesn't do that, this team stinks. I don't think it's a realistic expectation for this. You got to look at what they can and can't do. Barring that you didn't bring in John Elway as your new quarterback. So I think that's where things are at. I think the defense is going to be better. I think the edge rusher position is a big reason why they're going to get better, because you're going to have some really dynamic play by them. I feel really excited to see what they look like in the summer because, as long as they stay healthy, these two, Nwosisi and Chris Jones, could be names we're talking a lot about in November. Now, on tomorrow's show, I'm going to preview something really fun. I'll give you a real good spoiler for you. I'm expecting, you saw my Polly Walnuts tweet the other day. I'm expecting an announcement this afternoon. If that comes this afternoon, tonight, we'll be talking about a new commitment for BC football. Explain who that is, what that means, and a whole lot more. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Check me out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all the other social medias. And I'll see you all again soon for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.